Okay, everybody, welcome. So, this is going to be our discussion starting with the lungs and large intestines. So, as we're taking in a lot of new information, I'm going to invite you to just start to tap on your chest. Just even feel what we're working with. Don't allow it to just be in the mind. And so, some of the words associated with the lungs is non attachment, so non clinging, because we inhale oxygen and we release carbon dioxide multiple times an hour. And so, as we're looking at this, very much we're looking at the emotional quality in your life of where do you over attach or where are you detached? And there's a difference, right? Non attachment is that healthy, non grasping, and detachment can be kind of a bit of not caring or being absent from life. So we're going to take a look using this symbol here in the corner. This is a Tai Chi symbol. And let me tell you, I thought I understood what this meant. I was like, okay, one is yin and one is yang. And that's what this means. And it turns out it is actually much more complex and beautiful than that. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper. So the yin part is actually yang, or the white part is going to be the yang. So we think of the sun as very bright. It's all the external organs in the body that are constantly in motion. And we'll talk about organs in the body that are constantly in motion without your particular need to say, heart, can you beat? Or lungs, can you exhale? They're autonomic. And then when we look at this black part in the circle, we see that this is the yin quality. This is the deep reservoirs of storage in the body. So each of the organs is going to have an elemental association. This may be brand new content for you, or it may be new. So either way, I will encourage you to just take a moment and jot down in your notes that these are the 5 elements. And I also want to name that the elements are different in different traditions. I grew up using more of a Native American epistemology that included air as the direction of north. And when we look at air, because it's associated with space, that actually is the fascial system. It's all of the space in between the organs. And so that is sometimes considered the 6th element, and it's implicit in that it's everywhere in the system. Another thing that if you're used to a 4-element orientation that might surprise you is this aspect of metal, which is kind of this texture of where does metal come from? And what's beautiful about Taoism, any questions you have, the answer is in nature. Every question. And so when we look at metal, it's associated with autumn and the lungs. And in this association, go ahead and think about where in nature you find metal. We often find metal in the earth herself. These are things like geodes. The only exception to that would be a class of rock like meteorites that actually come down through space, but most mineral elements create boundaries between sediment. So when we have granite, that's a different type of quality than if we're harvesting something like turquoise. So metal is very much about the boundaries. And we can see that metal is going to give structure to water. Water then is going to nourish wood and help it grow like bamboo, like plants. And then that wood, in turn, feeds fire. Wood feeds fire. And then that fire is actually at the very core of the earth and is what gives it a geomagnetic spin on its axis is the heat. And then that heat then is helping the earth spin and nourish it. And then within the earth, we find metal. And then again, the cycle starts. So notice how we started with the Tai Chi on the last slide, and here we are again in that circle. If you notice this particular chart, and I'll be bringing in new charts each week, it's going to be a week and a day, each day that we meet, I'll bring in some new charts so you get to see. This one is featuring what we call the yin organs, the organs that hold a lot of storage in the body. So when we think about the kidneys, they're definitely filtrating, but they're not filtrating at the yang rate or that very high energy state as an organ like the bladder, who needs to be released, two, maybe three times within 4 hours. The kidneys are storing energy and life force, as well as blood in this case. Same with the liver. Go ahead and just rub your anatomical liver just underneath your right rib cage. We'll talk about the length and diameter as we get there. But this organ is doing mad storage for you. There's a ton of blood stored in both your liver and your kidneys. And so again, the liver is doing storage, whereas the gallbladder is like empty, close, empty, close. And it's constantly secreting biles to help you digest your food. Okay, so this is going to be our fire is the heart organ. So again, we're looking at this as the primary yin organ or storage because we have 4 chambers of blood. And yes, there is a life force to these various chambers moving blood. And we'll talk really specifically about the anatomy of that. But that's going to be very different than the small intestines, which is constantly churning and engaged in peristalsis of your food. Again, here we have earth and stomach. Note how this is late summer, and there's a distinction between early summer and late, and we'll talk about why that is as we progress. But earth here is associated with spleen. So again, we're really thinking about which organs are more yin, which organs are more yang. And the 5-element theory really comes from people who worked the land and people who were deeply engaged at what the seasons bring. And that's why there's a very big distinction. Like imagine no grocery stores. You were the farmer. You had to harvest and store all of your grains. There's a very big difference between what produce happens at the beginning of summer and late summer. And that's also why when we get into the kidneys, it's associated with fear, because the highest rates of death, if we look at history throughout millennia, was during winter, because you weren't sure, depending on your summer harvest, how much food you could store, kidney does storage, to last you through the winter. And even now, we see death rates are actually really high around winter solstice. I worked in a clinic for a long time, and I served elderly populations, and lo and behold, we would have a lot of patients pass away during these time portals of solstices or seasonal shifts. So this is a little bit of the context that we're going to jump into each evening and get to know. So this is metal. We'll talk about the emotional significators and get a little bit more into the Western anatomy, as well as the aspects that we can glean from Chinese medicine. So yesterday in our intro call, we spoke a lot about this beautiful thing called fascia. And I found this graphic and was like, this is the one. So you can see how fascia represents space. That's its element, because this, by technicality, is not the lung. This is the fascial system of the lung. And so very much this is the webbing that's holding every organ together. And as we spoke about yesterday, this is the imprint of emotional memory that the body carries and is very much connected with your immune system. That's what fascia is doing. It's really helping you move what we call lymph nodes. And those lymph nodes often, like in the armpit or the groin, that's where we have high volumes of lymph. Those need to be moved manually. They do not move themselves. So even if it's walking, massage, a hot shower, a cold shower, all of that squeezes our lymph and nourishes the fascia. Okay, so we talked about looking at each of the organs through this system of yin and yang. Here I provided a few more examples on this slide about what yin and yang means. As therapist, I invite in this exercise, and it was one that I started doing when I got to Chinese medical school. I was like, which counseling theories are more yin and which counseling theories are more yang? And it was this complete fun game I got to play. I was like, I think cognitive and behavioral therapy are more yang, and I think something like psychodynamic theory from Freud and Jungian psych, that's more yin. Hypnosis is more yin, and we can go on and on. We can even apply this to the body. So, which part of the body is more yin or yang? We could say the back of the body is going to be more yang and the front of the body is more yin. How do we know? If someone is going to hit you, what's the first thing anatomically your body knows how to do? You round in, you take a fetal pose because you're using more yang to protect the front side of yin. And we can do this down to the detail. We have certain channels in the body. There's 12 primary channels we work with. And they all come from these organs that we just looked at through the 5-element. But what's so beautiful about this is that the yin organs are actually more aligned with the anatomical line. So they're close to the belly button, the midline, the groin. Whereas the yang channels are more lateral, meaning they're on the outer leg, they're on the side body. So again, we have this concept of yin and yang that we'll be using throughout our discussion about these anatomical features because we are made from nature, down to phosphate, down to nitrogen. You basically are a periodic table. And so it makes complete sense that we would also have yin-yang organs as well as skin. So I provided us with a little bit of Western anatomy context. Some key things about respiration that's important is that you're often doing gas exchange. And so here, if you can see my mouse, we have the trachea and then what we call bronchi and bronchioli. But the alveoli are 300 million of these small, tiny sacs in your lungs. And so every time you inhale, it goes from trachea to bronchi to bronchioles, all the way down to alveoli. And so immediately your bloodstream gets oxygenated. And that's why if you're somebody that smokes or uses tobacco or these things, there's such an immediate effect because it goes straight to the bloodstream. And so that's very different than when we eat something and we chemically digest it. We could also see how much pollution and other irritants can really impact people because it goes straight to your blood. Another really cool fact is if you were to lay out all of your alveoli, they'd be the size of a tennis court. Isn't that wild? That if you were to stretch out all of your little lung sacs just out, I don't know, in your backyard, in your front yard, it'd take up the size of a tennis court. That's wild. Sorry, I love anatomy. It's like, go on, tell me more. Okay, so as we look at traditional Chinese medicine, there's still this concept of qi and respiration, but because the world operates from life force, from primordial life force, we're the same. And so respiration is that act of prana as we take it in. And so in Chinese medicine, it says that part of respiration is also descending turbid qi downwards, meaning it goes to the rest of the system. And some of the things that we look to if there's an imbalance can be things of loss of smell, sense of congestion, as parts of lung imbalance. Another really common one is people who have asthma or just a weak lung pattern. The lungs are going to be associated with metal element, which is the season of fall, as well as grief, loss, transition. And this really highlights the sensitivity of the lung itself. So it carries with it the emotion of grief. As I mentioned, everything has a pair. And what's really beautiful is there is a very intelligent science to Taoism and its daughter, its son, its non-conforming child, it's brilliant in how it's set up. So we can actually see that from a clock, each organ comes online and is more active at a certain time of day or night than others. So the lungs themselves are most active from 3 to 5 a.m. That is the strongest activity. And so the lungs, you can kind of think of them like buds on a tree. And if you looked at that picture, if I go a slide back, it actually looked like an inverse tree. Did anyone catch that? Should I go back? Okay, let me see. Do you see the tree that's inverted? And then these are all little alveoli sacs. The more we start to look at the anatomy of the human body, the more you're like, oh my gosh, I look just like nature. And so it's the same little buds that we're using. So as we look at the sensory organ of the lungs, they're connected to 3 to 5. And what's really wild about this connection of 3 to 5 is that the body is increasing production of the sleep hormone melatonin to make sure we sleep deeply. But it's also the time that our autonomic nervous system begins to relax the most throughout the entire 24-hour cycle. So blood pressure is going to slowly rise, and those with weak hearts often wake up at this time. And that can also be a result of edema or a slight collection of fluid in the lungs. Asthma attacks occur with the greatest frequency between 4 and 5 a.m., and that's through statistics. If we look at people who are on sleep apnea machines or have done studies, that is when the hour when people have the most difficult time. Also, research shows that people who have had children with sudden infant death syndrome, it often happens at this time as well, the lungs. Pretty fascinating stuff. So again, the theme is non-attachment and transformation for the lungs, metal element. When we move to the large intestine, this is its pair, and as I said, this is going to be more active. The large intestine itself is 5 feet long, and it fits within your abdominal cavity. It is primarily absorbing water and electrolytes to help your feces eliminate. So it stores that so that you can have a healthy excretion. In Chinese medicine, they say that 1 bowel movement in the morning a day is going to be most healthy. And anything that isn't 1 bowel movement a day tells us a lot about your microbiome health. So if stools are really loose, that means that the spleen isn't forming. If stools are really hard, that's a sign of dehydration because the function of the large intestine is to be storing water and hydration. Also, the microbiome of this gut really supports digestion, immunity, and how people report their mental health is. There was a study done in Spain. I haven't looked at this one in a while, but I think it was something like 18,000 people just started flooding into the hospitals complaining of depression. And these doctors could not figure out why everyone was flooding in. And so they got different teams on the case. Epidemiology, they had psychologists, they had medical doctors, psychiatry. And what they realized was that the topsoil of crops had been poisoned. And what people were ingesting was causing gut inflammatory symptoms. But the number one thing that patients came in reporting was depression. So there is a very strong connection of your gut health and your mental health. And so as clinicians, it is very important, highly important, that we're able to make nutritional recommendations. And there are plenty of nutritional CEUs we can take as counselors. And I suggest you take them because sometimes just a diet change can make a really huge deal on someone's reported mental health. So the large intestine, as we talked about, is going to be the yang partner, and it's all about our ability to let go. Also, I know how well someone is doing emotionally in relationships by how they're pooping, and you might be like, how would you know such things? How? Thanks for the smile, Ma. I agree. It's like, what? How are you in relationships? Tell me about your stool. Because it's our ability to let go. And often, if someone has a lot of trauma, if their vagal nerve, which ends in the stomach, and the gut is irritated, then often there is a small intestine aspect that's happening here, in addition to the large intestines that having difficulty letting go. All right, so I'm approaching up on our kind of the wind down of both this east-west convergence. So here are just some, small aspects for us to hold, little gems. The lungs primarily are tasked with a gas exchange. The large intestine specifically does fluid absorption and helps us decide emotionally what do I want to keep nutritionally and what do I need to let go of? Like, quite literal, what shit do I need to let go of in life? And that process is anatomical as much as it is emotional. And then, of course, we're able to look at immediate cellular change based on oxygen you get. And that's why having plants in your home is such a big deal. Talking to your plants, cultivating relationship, because basically they are the ones in your home eating your waste and turning it to something useful. As we look at traditional Chinese medicine, we are in this notion of how we express grief. Also, we're in this notion of understanding large intestine and metal as a pair that's related to fall time, our ability to let go and practice acceptance. So when we think about what is good health for the colon, we're thinking about a warm glass of water. That is an excellent way to start your day. And actually, it will boost metabolism. And you might say, why? Why start the day with warm water? Because your stomach is not cold. The United States invented the ice cube, and it is still the only country that uses the ice cube. And it's kind of silly if we think about it, because your stomach, when it receives something cold, it shrinks. So if you're shrinking your stomach and then trying to eat, how well are you digesting? So that's why we say just a warm cup of water is a beautiful self-care technique to use, just to help you let go even of the emotional things. So again, the lungs, their strongest activity is going to be 3 a.m. to 5, along with the colon. The element is metal, which is about our ability to have boundaries with others as well as ourself. Metal is going to manifest in body tissue such as skin and hair, as well as lymph. In Chinese medicine, we also look at the color of each organ, and this organ is considered white. And some of the metals that are associated with it in the body that is easily digested is quicksilver. So I hope this gives you a small introductory as to how metals work in the body. And when we look at the season of metal, there's a lot of grief because it truly is, it's the end. Here are some references if you want to read more. This book, by the way, is like the size of my fist, just for like how thick the book is. But I highly suggest it if you want to nerd out. I mean, it has everything in there. So, so as we're talking about metal, it's a blade. It's sharp. And that metal is super important. It's that compassionate edge of no, with love. Or really, this morning I had to assert in a boundary. I have a service dog, Sage, who I love so much. And we're on a walk and she was saying hi to another dog. I said, hey, can my dog say hi to yours? And the person said, sure. And then their dog went to attack Sage and just showed teeth. And lovingly, I went up to that dog and I went, ah! And I put the other dog in its place and she just sat down and looked at me. And so boundaries, and I'm not upset. And I said, oh, it sounds like your dog needed a boundary. Boundaries aren't bad, not at all. But with Chinese medicine, it's that metal. There's no more summer harvest. And so we have to be strict with ourselves of what we're going to save, of what we ration if we are farmers living 200 years ago. So metal brings up a lot of grief for us. There's no more summer. There's no more strawberries growing. There are no more apricots. And so there is this grief that we experience as humans. And as I mentioned, these certain pivotal points in clinic is when people die, more likely, and it's very celestial in that way. And so 3 to 5 is actually the hour that many people die. And we can look at those statistically. If you want to nerd out on it, you totally can. So there is this element of grief of how we practice non-attachment and how we practice letting go, knowing that the breath, the inhale just comes naturally. So we don't have to hold on. So we are going to take some time and set down all the intellectualization, which we know from psychodynamic theory. Intellectualization is actually an ego defense mechanism. It's thinking we can know everything. When really everything you need to know, the internal teacher's right here. At the core of who I am art. I am artist. I am words. I am poet. May you adorn yourself in gems, minerals, stones, calcium, phosphate, magnesium, ruby, garnet, all across your heart, across the sacred heart. May you shine like a twinkling star. From time to time, remember to set down the alphabet soup, the letters, the syllables, the sounds, the words, the moves that create the structure of who we are. PhD, LPC, DOM, LAC, OCD, PDA, all just letters, words, soup. And underneath the collective labeling, there could be nothing else other than element, fire, breath, volcano, power, rage. There could be nothing else but wind, breeze, howling, currents, currents and currents, howling currents. There could be nothing else but growth, branches, roots, ancestors, who you are, always at your feet, under your feet, kissing your feet, whispering how to grow, when to grow, the right season of time. But you, dear one, are forged through fire. You carry the arrow, the blade of structure, of necessity, of needing control, because you speak the nectar of all that is. Your pure soul holds and holds and endures and endures. For who? For us, for me, for the world. Your sacred heart bleeds and beats. Dear sacred one of metal, you remember the adornment. Place the jewels, the minerals, the pearls, all over your body. Let them remind you of the nectar you carry and the conduits of metal that boil and burn through your blood, the original fire of Mother Earth. May you remember the gift of lungs that teaches you how to breathe, when the right time is to breathe. There's a time for yes. There is a time for no. Not now. Wait. Let the hand of Saturn guide you. Trust. Do you trust all that is to support you. Do you remember? Do you remember that the universe conspires for your benefit and every breath she takes? Sacred star tenders, children's star walkers, thank you, thank you, thank you for being the volcanoes that have been pushed underwater. Thank you for being the loud screams of the pond that bears pollution, oil, filth, rot, greed. Thank you for screaming and kicking for all of us, the ones who cannot kick, the ones who cannot scream, the ones who conform. Thank you for whatever mental health you carry, for the collective, for the us, for the me, for the we, beyond generations of time. May you adorn yourself in jewels, pearls, garnet, ruby. May you walk like the queen and the king and the they of this world. Metal knows conduit. Every meridian in the earth grid knows dragon. Every meridian in the body knows heart fire. Sometimes the hurricanes are so big. We bleed, we cry, we melt, we drown. But it is the gift of lung, inhale, and the gift of intestines, let go. Trust. This is not all yours to carry. And let the hand of your mother, your father, your grandmother, her grandmother, his grandmother, gently push you into the structure you need. You will never be harmed. You are safe. Do you trust me? Do you trust life to sometimes tell you no or not now? Adorn yourself in jewels, crowns, rubies.